capacity of TransCanada's existing Keystone pipeline to more than 1 million barrels a day, with a new line from Alberta to the storage hub at Cushing, Oklahoma, and for the first time, connecting Cushing to the Gulf Coast and its fleet of heavy oil refineries. Over its lifetime, TransCanada says XL would pump more than $20 billion into the U.S. economy and create over 100,000 direct and indirect jobs. It would also help wean Americans off more volatile oil sources like Saudi Arabia and Venezuela, and by opening up a new market on the Gulf Coast, it would give a much-needed lift to Canadian oil sands producers.
Given that they're very heavily reliant on the U.S. Midwest refinery sector, because there's a massive supply glut right now because of the fact the oil can't get anywhere else within the United States very easily, that keeps prices a good $20 a barrel below comparable crude for heavy oil prices.
Over the next 25 years, the Canadian Energy Research Institute estimates XL would add more than $600 billion to the Canadian economy. Without it, or a comparable West Coast pipeline to open up Asian markets, analysts warn the oil sands industry could become landlocked in bitumen. Michael, Keystone XL has already received a positive environmental approval from the State Department. They're pretty confident that they're going to win this fight, but they're not taking any chances here. They've got their top executives, they've got lobbyists fanning out across the states through which this pipeline would run right now in advance of those hearings, trying to drum up support. And of course, I will be down there for the first hearing in Port Arthur, Texas on Monday. I'll be bringing live reports from there, from Oklahoma, and from Nebraska as well. And then we'll have a special series on this coming up as the hearings wrap up a couple weeks from now.
All right, thank you, Brett.
You're welcome.
Brett Harris is our Western Bureau Chief. So if they want gas, let them have gas, says our next guest. The president of the Alberta Federation of Labor opposes the proposed Keystone XL pipeline. Turning to the president of the Alberta Federation of Labor, he is in Edmonton. Hello, Gil.
Hi, Michael.
How is this a jobs killer for Canada?
Well, we were in Ottawa yesterday meeting with MPs, primarily opposition MPs, because so far the debate has been polarized between the energy companies on one hand who support the pipeline and environmentalists on the other hand who oppose it. And we went to Ottawa, our Federation of Labor, along with our energy unions from Alberta, to send a message that workers in Canada's energy heartland also oppose the pipeline because we're concerned about the job implications. And frankly, we're frustrated to see our politicians, both provincial and federal, down south of the border, shilling for a pipeline company, making an argument that they're going to create 100, 200, 300,000 jobs south of the border, which we think should be created not in Texas or Mississippi, but rather in Alberta, Saskatchewan, places like Fort Saskatchewan or Fort McMurray. For us, the bottom line is that Americans want our energy resources. They want gas in their tanks, and so let's give them that gas instead of locking ourselves into the bottom rung of the value ladder. And that's when I hear people like our federal energy minister Joe Oliver talk about his continental energy strategy. Frankly, I'm frustrated to hear that, because who decided that we need to lock ourselves into a continental energy strategy, especially when Alberta is at the bottom rung, just the classic Canadian role of hewers of wood, drawers of water, and in this case, diggers of bitumen. The real money, the real jobs are in upgrading and refining, and we shouldn't settle for less, frankly.
Okay, but that doesn't kill jobs by not doing this. It just doesn't create jobs. If you want to create the jobs, you've got to create the refineries, and how likely is it you're going to get a refinery built anytime soon?
Well, first of all, let me say that there is demand in the United States, and if we produce it, they will buy it. The second thing that we've been trying to point out to the MPs and other policymakers is that while we have plenty of jobs here in Alberta right now, what we're experiencing is in many ways a construction boom, not an energy boom. And the big question is, for us in Alberta, what will be left after the construction of all these extraction-only projects, like the current Pearl project under development by Exxon right now is just an extraction project. When we build these things and the construction work is done, what are Albertans going to be buttering their bread with? How are they going to be making their living? If we don't have physical industrial plant in this province after the big construction projects are done, we're afraid that the boom will quickly turn to bust, and we won't have long-term employment. So, this is our resource owned by the people of Alberta, and as the owners of the resource, we think that we should be making the best business decision, not just in the long term to rip the stuff and ship it out of the country, but actually to build jobs and build prosperity for the future. And frankly, that means upgraders and refineries.
Okay, I understand that if we produce it, they will buy it, but if it takes 10 years to build that refinery anyway, considering ours are already operating at 89% capacity, that's a decade before a single job is created in this country on a long-term basis.
Yeah, well, we actually have a couple of upgraders that have gotten their approvals, but they're stalled right now, and energy companies have given up on them, largely because most of these big energy companies are based south of the border. They have physical plant in places like the American Gulf Coast, and frankly, it is cheaper for them to simply ship the raw stuff from Alberta south of the border. But the point that we're trying to make to policymakers both here in Edmonton and in Ottawa is that just because it's good for Exxon doesn't mean it's good for Albertans. And for us, the public interest of Albertans, the long-term public interest of Albertans and Canadians, especially when it comes to job creation, that public interest should trump the narrow corporate interest of companies like Exxon.
But I'm confused about the upgraders being stalled because, as I understood it, part of the reason, Gil, that they were stalled is that they're having a difficult time finding the labor. There's a shortage of labor to do that in the first place. So even if we had the jobs available, we wouldn't have the people.
This is the argument that we've been hearing from our policymakers here in Alberta. They say, we've got plenty of jobs now, so don't worry about it. But, given the fact that we're facing the resumption of a global recession, I don't think we can be cavalier about the loss of not just thousands of jobs, but tens, maybe even hundreds of thousands of jobs. The Americans are our good neighbors, but, that doesn't mean we have to give away hundreds of thousands of jobs. The other thing, in terms of the so-called labor shortage, it's real right now, but it is a creation of government policy here in Alberta, and it could easily be rectified. Just last week, Peter Lougheed, our former premier, made headlines by saying that he opposed the Keystone XL pipeline because he thought we should be focusing on upgrading and refining. One of the comments that he made, which didn't get wide reporting, was that in addition to stopping and opposing Keystone XL, he said our provincial government should do a better job of pacing development, because the reason that we're having a tight labor market here in Alberta, especially for the construction trades, is because our provincial government has simply approved every application for extraction-only development that's come across their desks, to the point now we've got 62 multi-billion-dollar oil sands projects on the books, all of them these short-term extraction-only projects, and they've all been approved without any long-term thought about the job implications. And surprise, surprise, we got a tight labor market. So if we took Peter Lougheed's advice and actually approved only 10, maybe 15 projects and had active construction on maybe 5 or 7, then we could do all the projects, and not only would we be able to employ construction workers, we'd be able to employ more of them without supplementing our workforce with temporary foreign workers. We could build the kind of projects like upgraders, like refineries, that would be in the long-term best interest of Canadians. So, these arguments that, that we've got enough jobs now, there's a labor shortage, these are problems that can be addressed, and I think that the long-term best interest of our province and our country would be better served by moving up the value ladder than continuing to languish in the basement.
So why isn't slowing development of the oil sands kind of akin to closing the barn door after the horses have left? Aren't you killing jobs by slowing?
No, actually, you see, the problem right now, we do have a labor shortage. The only way that the projects in the oil sands are being completed is by our energy companies and the construction companies that they work with, supplementing their workforces with literally thousands and thousands of temporary foreign workers. And, I have nothing personally against these people, but my preference and the preference of most people in the labor movement here in Alberta would be to have a smaller number of large projects, building things like upgraders and refineries, and employing our existing Canadian construction labor force, and just moving them from one project to another as it's done. And right now, a third of our construction labor force is coming from out of the country, and basically doing jobs that could be done by Canadian tradesmen and craftsmen if we pace the development.
Well, Gil, we appreciate your time and your insight. Thank you for joining us here today.
Okay, thanks, Michael.
Gil McGowan, president of the Alberta Federation of Labor. He joined us from Edmonton. The web